Okay, guys, meet you. Right.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this evening. I think it promises to be a very informative evening. We'll be able to get up to date on the results of the design and development stage of the Stratford High School renovation project. We'll give this council the opportunity to see and ask questions about the project. But before we do, and I'd like to also make thanks for it not snowing tonight and not being icy tonight. Before we start with the Stratford High School renovations, we have two quick things on our agenda that are really a matter of housekeeping for us. So if we can start with number 2, the proposed budgetary transfers. Mr. Young.
Madam Chair, you want to call the meeting to order?
I call the meeting to order.
I move to the proposed budgetary transfers, to approve the proposed budgetary transfers.
Could you please speak up?
I move that we approve the proposed budgetary transfers in accordance with 625 of the Stratford Town Charter. Notice was given to the Stratford Town Council, proposes to make the following transfer of unused funds, balances appropriated for one purpose to another purpose in the budget, appropriated for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2015 and ending July 30th, 2016. Resolution A, authorizing amendments and transfers in the general fund budget for fiscal year 2015-2016, non-sale of WPCA.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Is there a second for that, Mr. Petty?
Wally Kadeem, I second it.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there discussion on this?
Madam Chairman?
Who was that?
It was me. Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Question.
On the very bottom.
Hello? Here we go. Are we, we're voting on just A at the moment, or A and B?
We're voting on just A at the moment. We're taking them separately.
Beautiful. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome. Any more discussion on these issues? Yes, Mr. Duma?
Well, I would note a couple things here is the ordinance is written, or the resolution is written, much in it is not actually transfers. 6.2.5 of the charter authorizes the council to approve transfers or allocations of revenues that were not originally included in the budget. I think it would be perfectly appropriate to include the allocation of the WPCA funds, which is approximately $1.38 million. A resolution authorizing that would be appropriate under the charter. But the remaining items are actually, they're not transferring money from one budget line item to another. And that is actually amending an ordinance through a resolution, which you can't do. You have to amend an ordinance through an ordinance. And in that sense, I think that an ordinance is a proper mechanism to do that, whereas I certainly would think it's appropriate to do the WPCA transfers, and I would offer that as a friendly amendment to limit it to the WPCA funds, the $1.38 million.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Duma. Is there other discussion on this?
I would second the amendment, Madam Chairman.
Okay, there's a friendly amendment offered for this. And can you repeat what the friendly amendment, exactly what it is?
It would be to limit the appropriations to the $1.38 million from the WPCA, which is the WPCA contractual services, the miscellaneous revenue land use, and the transfer from WPCA line item, which adds up to $1.38 million, and to strike any of the remaining, they're not technically appropriations or transfers, but the remaining line items.
Second. There's a second for that. Okay. I'd like to call Attorney Hodgson up, the town attorney, because they have commented on this They provided me, and I forwarded the memo from the town attorney's office to town council members this afternoon immediately when I had received it. So, Mr. Hodgson, would you like to comment on this?
Yes,
on the
I'll try to
appropriate.
speak gladly. The issue would be, is the resolution correct? And it asks Sue Collier if she could comment on whether those are budget transfers in Resolution A.
They're transfers between accounts. They're not changing the bottom line of the fiscal year 16 budget. In prior years, we've always done it through resolution. When it's interdepartmental, when it's intra-departmental, I do it through a journal entry type of budget transfer in my office. If you do approve it as is, I would ask you that you keep it the way it was originally intended. It's not the transfer from debt service. The reason that's being adjusted is because the sale did not happen. Had the sale happened, the income from that sale would have run through the debt service fund. That's why you see the word debt service there. And that's why that amount is similar to the fund balance in WPCA. But that sale does not represent taking the WPCA fund balance. It represents the proceeds from the sale of the entire plan. So that's it.
So my view would be,
No.
well, my view would be under 6.2.5 that these are unused balances being transferred to the budget, and the resolution A is appropriate as stated.
Okay, thank you very much. No, would you, what?
My question to Ms. Collier is, what exactly is the debt service fund?
It's another type of internal service fund that we have so that we can smooth out the impact of larger debt. When we went out for pension obligation bond not refinancing, but the new pension obligation bonds, we began this debt service fund because the first few years of the new bond issuance spiked up, and then it smooths out and it goes down in the 2020, 2021 range. But in the short term, there was a large spike in our costs, but in the overall, we're going to save, I think it was $70 or $80 million over the life of the bonds on the pension obligation bonds. So we built in an internal service fund similar to what we have for health and workers' comp so that we can smooth out the impact on the annual budget. So each year we would take a certain amount of money out of the debt service fund to smooth out the impact of debt service until our old bond issuance goes away and our debt service is more manageable.
Okay, I guess my question really is, you mentioned at first, I think you said these monies, it would have been the debt service fund, would have gone to New Haven, and it didn't go? No,
it's the other way around. Had the sale happened, we would have received a lump sum from New Haven. That would have gone into the debt service fund. Some of that money, 5.1 of it, would then be brought into the general fund in fiscal year 16 to balance the budget. The remaining money would stay in the debt service fund and be used in future budgets, fiscal 17, fiscal 18, fiscal 19, to smooth out the impact of other critical issues that we have.
All right, but the New Haven deal that didn't go through included the WPCA reserve fund of over $5 million. That's what I'm trying to get at. The WPCA fund balance has not been touched. It will not be touched. Okay.
It is what it is. And we have a fiscal year 15 ending balance for that. We'll have one at the end of 16. It will not be touched. By this process, or not until you guys set your budget for next year, and you may or may not choose to use some of that fund balance to balance your fiscal year 17 WPCA budget. But that actually has nothing to do with what I'm asking you to do here. I mean, it has something to do with it, but it never occurred, so the WPCA was never sold, so the fund balance is safe.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to call to vote on the friend.
I have a
Wait,
question.
let me recognize you first. Okay, Mr. Duma?
I have a question for Ms. Collier. The line item for the pilot payment, the $200,000, it says from revenue decrease. Where is that being transferred to?
I think it's like line 1100, 14. Yes.
The net impact of all of these budget transfers needs to be zero. The debits and the credits, the expenses and the revenues. Therefore, the number of $580,000 of revenue being decreased from the transfer from debt service fund, that is the offset to the $200,000 removal of a pilot from WPCA. It is the net impact of all the other changes that I'm making to make sure that in the end, the overall budget is still balanced. Our appropriation and our revenues are the same.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to call to vote on the friendly amendment. Mr. Kadim, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Young, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Llewellyn?
Pass.
Ms. Manis?
Yes.
Mr. Duma?
Yes.
Ms. Antezo?
Yes.
Mr. Gresco?
No.
And I vote no, so the friendly amendment, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Llewellyn?
What's the vote count?
It is 4-4.
There's your day. I know. And this is just on the amendment.
This is only on the friendly amendment. May I remind you that the finance director does not see the need.
I raised a point of procedure. The chair isn't supposed to participate in debate.
Okay? Mr. Llewellyn, when did you vote?
Oh, sorry, yes, I'm voting yes to the amendment.
Okay, so it's 5-4. It does not pass, goes down. Thank you. Okay, so now let's vote on the resolution itself. Okay, on the resolution, Mr. Kadim?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Duma?
No.
Okay, Ms. Antezo?
No.
Mr. Gresco?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Llewellyn?
Yes.
Ms. Manis?
No.
And I vote yes, so the resolution passes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, what was the vote count?
6-3. Do we need 7?
But you need seven votes to make a transfer under 6.2.1. Under those circumstances, it fails.
I'm sorry, it fails.
Under those circumstances, it fails, because only 6 people voted affirmative before.
Can we revisit this when David is back in town? Because I know he was one to co-sponsor
You
this.
can reconsider it at the next regular meeting if you want to.
Can we reconsider it as a special meeting?
That, I don't know. That I'd have to look at.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a parliamentary inquiry for the chair, for the town attorney through the chair. If it is reconsidered, that would have to be moved for by someone on the prevailing side.
That is correct. That is correct. That would mean, in this case, the prevailing side is someone who voted no.
Okay, Resolution B, resolution authorizing amendments and transfers in the general fund budget for fiscal year 2015-16, internal service fund funding. This resolution has to do with structural changes in the budget. Mr. Young, would you like to introduce this resolution? Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I motion
I motion that we approve resolution authorizing amendments and transferring the general fund for fiscal year 2015-2016 internal service fund funding.
Okay, thank you.
Wally Kadeem, I second it.
Okay, discussion? Yes, Mr. Duma?
I do have some concerns about the proposal to take the money out of the internal service fund. This effectively appears to be kicking the can down the road, similar to underfunding or borrowing money from a pension fund to pay today's debts, but in this case it's the healthcare fund. And although I certainly would expect the administration to say, it's very well funded, etc., quite honestly, this administration has not earned the benefit of the doubt, and quite frankly has done the opposite of earning the benefit of the doubt in terms of whether or not we can place any confidence in things they say like that. So I think that this is something that we honestly need more information on to address accurately. And then taken as a whole, these two resolutions, they don't actually balance the budget. They're still approximately $1 million short. And I don't think that that's something we want to do. I think we address this problem and we fix it so that next year's budget we're not starting in a hole. Because we'll be starting in a hole for the $1 million that we're short, plus the $3 million we're taking out of the internal service fund that we're probably going to be asked to put back in the next budget. Yes, that's 4 months away, but why do we want to dig ourselves in a hole? Our job is to deal with it now.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there other discussion?
Yes, I have discussion. In terms of good faith, we waited patiently for the mayor to come up with a solution. I like the solution. I like the fact that they took the time to look at what was there economically to what we can put back or use in order to cover some of the budget that is lost. The fact that we're standing here discussing and fighting every little thing is really a waste of time. We need to get on board with doing what needs to be done to move our town forward instead of knocking down every little thing, fighting about point of procedure, fighting about who's right and who's wrong. We really need to take care of business so the town can move forward. And the fact that this is going to keep happening, nothing's going to get done. And it's like the old council, nothing's getting done. So if we ain't going to get on board, then get off. So we really need to straighten this out. Because all of this fighting constantly, every meeting, hours and hours of who's right and who's wrong is a waste of time. So this council's got to get their mind right, focus on doing what we need to do to take care. So, okay, we're $1 million short. Okay, we'll find that some other time, but we need to do something. We keep sitting on this each meeting. We need to do something with this. So whoever wants to fight, get gloves and go in the ring and do that. When we're here, let's take care of business.
Thank you very much. The finance director would like to speak.
Thank you. I just want to clarify a couple things. This is not the end all. This was the starting point, was to make these two resolutions. Obviously, we still want to find more savings prior to fiscal year end if possible. Number one. Number two, we are not taking money from the internal service fund. We are choosing not to fund our long-term workers' comp liability at the same pace we were in the past. We are not raiding any funds, and we certainly are not raiding our pension fund. Never have, never will. And finally, I understand your frustration, but honestly, I have been honest with you, and I hope you guys know that I have only Stratford's best interest at heart. And everything I'm doing, I'm being as open and honest as I can with you. And I have if you don't want to pass it, that's fine. But trust me when I tell you, everything that I tell you is to the best of my knowledge and my research and my expertise. So I just want to put that on record.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collier. Ms. Manis? Actually, you're recognized.
Hi. I listened to Mr. Kadeem, Councilman Kadeem, speak, and I understand that things are messy, but that's what it is, and it's a mess, and we knew that getting into it when we ran, and we knew that we would disagree, and I ran on transparency, and I ran on being part of the process, and I appreciate Ms. Collier's information and all of your transparency. It's difficult to digest something that you're sort of a part of and then you're not. And I think that one of the things that has been spoken about is the fact that we just need to talk about it a little bit and understand what's happening. And I think that that's what's happening here. And I don't think it's negative. But I just wanted to say that I don't think it's a bad thing that we're talking about things and that we're doing it in public and that that's happening. So I don't agree with Wally with that. But moving forward, I think that I do agree that we need to, go along to get along a little bit, but leaving a budget with $1 million gap is not okay by me. I don't like that. If it's the only option we have, then that's it. But I think that we can do better.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chase.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On February 1st, you wrote an email stating doing just these two sets of resolutions may leave the town about $1.5 million short, but this is manageable. A question through you, Madam Chairman, to the Finance Director. You indicated maybe 3 weeks ago that you anticipated that in all probability we'd be facing another deficit for the next fiscal year. Is that still the case?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So what that means is that right now we have approximately $1 to $1.5 million in debt. We now face within the next few weeks the fiscal 16-17 year budget, which has anticipated a deficit. Yet we're not moving any forward. Yet, Madam Chairman, you offered in February some budget modifications which included reductions in human resources, planning and zoning, economic development, removal of cars, salaries, etc. And then you stopped short on this. Through you, I'm curious to know why you didn't feel it necessary to pursue these budget modifications that many of us were interested in seeing implemented.
And in the email, I also asked for council members to offer other modifications. You were at a meeting with the CAO where they did promise that modifications were made with Mr. Ciccarelli and Chris Timniak. So as far as I am aware, that some of the stipends and the cars have been taken care of. If there were more modifications, those could have been put on also. What's in front of us were two resolutions. One was simply cleaning up for the non-sale of the WPCA. The other one is doing the structural transfer that doesn't preclude any other modifications. That's all that's here. So right now we should only be talking about Resolution B that's in front of us.
So be it. Through you, Madam Chairman, again to the Finance Director, the Chairman just indicated that Mr. Ciccarelli had offered some additional cuts, internal cuts. I believe she said vehicles, stipends. Have those been implemented?
Unfortunately, I have to defer to the CAO. I am not part of that. If I knew, I would tell you. I have no knowledge.
So, as the Finance Director, you have no knowledge that that happened, therefore it probably has not happened, because I would assume they would have had to go on through you.
I have no knowledge that that has happened.
Okay. Thank you. You've answered my question. Madam Chairman, I'm going to vote for this resolution. I don't think it's enough. I would hope that the Council at the Ordinance Committee would address some of the other cuts that were offered by Mr. Dumas and others. And I would point out that Ms. Manis spent a whole weekend going through the entire budget and came up with a number of cuts that I also thought were appropriate. So I thank you for your time, Madam Chairman.
That's great. I'm looking forward to seeing those. Still on resolution, I'm sorry, Ms. Antessa.
Thank you. Is it on? My observation is going along with Vin's. We as a council really have not sat down and gone over the budget. We had 2 meetings, but they ended up just being reports from heads of departments. We didn't sit down and look at the budget. And we should do that, because there are definite places where even now some savings can be made. And I think that we should do so before we okay this.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Chase for recognizing the work that I put in weeks and weeks ago. It was not, I want to be very transparent here, that work was not done this weekend, it was done many weekends ago. It was sent to multiple people, it was sent to my caucus, it was sent to the minority caucus, it was sent to my friends and people in all different walks of Stratford to say, hey, this is an idea, do you think it will work? And it's not something that I took lightly, and some of those things were on the original budget modification put forward by the chair, some of those line item things, but it was just an idea. It was also sent to the mayor. So that's important because we all need to work together. So I'm trying very hard, and if those line items want to be looked at, I'm happy to share them again. I'm happy to go over them and to find something.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I call to vote on the resolution B? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. DeBron?
I believe Mr. Ciccarelli would like to share some information with us.
Thank you for the time, Council. I just wanted to clarify a few things. Number one is the on the vehicle front. Again, those are cosmetic changes. It doesn't change our costs at all. We have implemented changes to vehicle usage, which we have gotten pushed back on due to union requirements for those vehicles. So we're working through that now. Regarding the stipends, again, a very small amount of money. What we did, we took guidance from the chair to look at some of the stipends and reorganize those stipends into actual part-time additional jobs. So they're going to go to be opened up as additional positions, and those stipends pulled away from the additional users of those stipends now, or the stipend was rolled into the salary as if it was really a part of their job anyway. It didn't make any sense to have a stipend since it was part of their main job. But all of those items are unfortunately cosmetic. I agree with the finance director that it was hard to get to these numbers here. I fully would like to get to zero, but we have to start someplace. I'll be happy to sit down with Chris Timiak and Sue Collier and go over any of that data. Councilwoman Manis, I did not see your proposals, so I can't comment on them.
Yes, you did.
I did.
Yes, you did. They were weeks. Remember in the very beginning, you wrote back to me. You said, I'm going to share it with the mayor. And then the mayor came out with his proposal that following day.
Yeah, you might have. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't remember. It was not, okay. That was before we had our council budget hearings there. Right, you can send that to me again. But again, it's something that we have to start someplace structurally. It gets us closer. We have no idea what the deficit's going to be for next year. We worked very hard this week to look at zero budgeting for the fiscal 17 budget. Even taking consideration collective bargaining agreement changes that will force us to increase budgets in certain departments. Those budgets that had increases due to CBA were reduced in other areas in order for those budgets to remain flat. So the goal that we've had from all the departments, Chris and I have been working on all week, is to at least make sure that those budgets are flat as a starting point moving forward for fiscal 17. Hopefully that will help retard any deficit we have to move forward. Both of those together, so any deficit in 17 will be very as small as possible. You can't guarantee a zero budget, considering we're actually doing two budgets simultaneously right now. Really, what we're doing.
Larry, I may have misheard you. My hearing aid just kicked out. Did you say you couldn't do anything about the cars because of union?
There are. We identified 6 final drivers. One were able to achieve what we needed to. That was an at-will person. The other 5 was in a union that had an MOU, memorandum of understanding, that dictated they had those vehicles for 24 hours a day. So that's what we're working on right now, to work through that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chase?
Larry, cosmetic changes?
I'm only talking cosmetic from a dollar amount, not a functional amount.
Okay. Let me ask you something. We've got a $1 million, $1.5 million deficit. Sue is indicating that we have another deficit coming up. Do you have an idea where we're going to start cutting? You talked about the stipends and that we'd use that money now to hire people. Discussions were made within this council about maybe imposing a hiring freeze. I mean, at what point do we try to get a handle on this town's spending?
Well, the particular stipends amount, which amounts to $5,000 here, $15,000, $20,000 there, was analyzed with the chairwoman to each individual. You were there, Councilman, and we looked at each item on a per item basis to make a determination what to do with those stipends.
That it?
Well, and then we accordingly did what we had discussed. One, we had pulled out to offer another job, which was the guidance from our meeting we had. One was rolled into their salary, and two were going to be eliminated based on changes to the job descriptions.
Okay.
So
5,000 here, 2,000 there. Again, if you could answer my question, where do you see us ultimately cutting this budget, reducing the town's spending to balance our budget, not only this year, but next year?
Well, we don't know what the final amount's going to be. You have only three aspects of a budget. You have the expenses that could be deducted. You have a payroll, which means people can be cut or furloughed, and then you have capital spending from a general fund perspective that can be reduced. So those areas that we're going to look at, the idea is to find out what that number is. That makes it a little bit easier to determine where the best place to cut is.
Okay, lastly, when do you expect to provide the council with the next budget?
I have to defer to the finance director.
Finance director?
March 12th.
Thank you.
By midnight. Per charter.
Mr. Kadim, and then I think we'll to vote on this.
So, first of all, thanks for coming down, Brother Ciccarelli. I know you moved on.
This isn't about your business card, is it? The question?
No,
Okay.
we good on that.
Okay,
But
good.
what I want to be clear on, these things that our councilman, Mr. Tizzo, is speaking about, are things we spoke about clearly. Like these cars should really be going, and these what do you call those, stipends should be not put into their salary, but actually taken away. They already make enough. I mean, you make $100 plus a year, plus a car, and there's only 24 hours in a day. Why do a person need a car for 25? Don't you sleep and work 8 and 8, which is 16? I can understand being available to you, meaning drive to the location, pick the car up, and go where you need to go. So we really need to tighten up on that, because someone to enter into agreement to make available a car to you, 25, that's fine, but not for you to have the car. You understand what I'm saying?
I don't disagree with you, but the problem here is this is a public sector environment, and there's contracts and there are memorandums of understanding that supersede our will, as if we're perceiving this to be a private enterprise to get those things to happen overnight.
I just want to be clear. You said it wasn't in the contract.
Okay, we need to get back to this.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, call to vote on resolution B.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just to point out something, I could be reading the resolution I have in front of me wrong, but if you look at the last paragraph, it talks about transfers shown in exhibits attached and made part of the resolution, appended as page 5, combining statement page 6. On my agenda, the resolution itself is on page 5, but the two exhibits are pages 6 and 7. So you may want to amend the resolution and correct it. If I'm reading it right,
Okay.
I don't know that I...
Mr. Young, would you like to amend your resolution?
Ask for a resolution to include pages 6 and 7 as exhibits.
Second.
Okay, so we will vote on the friendly amendment that would include, that would change the reference to the statements. Okay, Mr. Young? You're just voting on that amendment? Yes?
So 5 is the actual.
In a second, in a second. It's on 6 and 7. Yep. Okay, Mr. Duma?
Madam Chair, may I offer a friendly amendment
There's a friendly amendment on the table.
to that amendment to simply change the page numbers from 5 and 6 to 6 and 7?
That's what he just offered.
What he didn't actually say, but that's...
I thought that's what I heard.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, are you voting? How are you voting?
Change the page numbers?
Yes, I'm calling the vote on that.
Yes.
He voted yes?
On the-
You voted
on the-
yes,
on the
too?
amendment.
On the amendment?
Yes.
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 Mr. Gresko?
Yes.
Okay, changing the page numbers.
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Okay. Now let's vote on the resolution. Okay, Mr. Young?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Duma?
No.
Ms.
No.
Zantezo?
Yes.
Gresko? Mr. Chase?
As I indicated, Madam Chairman, I'm going to vote yes. I think it's a start, poor start, but it's a start.
Start.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Manis?
Pass.
Okay, the chair votes yes. Ms. Manis?
Promise me it's a start. Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes 7 to 2. Okay, thank you. So Resolution B passed, Resolution A did not. I'd like to now call up Mr. Petroselli to discuss the history of the project. I know that you're all here to hear about Stratford High School renovations, so we'll move to that part of our agenda. The town council is below, so you can also see the project and the plans. No.
So, hello.
Hi, I'm Len Petroselli. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board of Education. Jim Feehan, our chairman, could not be here tonight because he had a previous commitment. So I'm going to give you a brief history of the project. I really didn't get involved with the project till December of 2013. But thanks, I don't think Andrew is still here, our former board chair. She gave me some of the history. So, in 2011, a plan to renovate with an addition was approved with a cost of $56 million. And at that point, it was a 50% reimbursement rate. June 2012, they issued an RFQ for architectural services. They hired an architect in November. This is back in 2012. In 2013, the RFQ went out looking for a site to relocate Stratford High School. Instead of renovating it and adding it to the current site, there were no takers on that. And then in 2013, it was suggested that we build it at Longwood Park, and as you all know, that didn't go well. In 2013, the state approved an extension to revisit the existing site where the school is currently located. The construction manager was selected, which was Craig. And the project increased from 56 to 90 million because the original plan did not meet the educational specs. Classroom sizes have to be increased from 650 square feet to 750 to 800 square feet to fit their requirements. And this could not be accomplished without an addition. This is where I got involved in December of 2013. I'm not going to go over the entire process, but I'm going to go over to what the committee actually went through. The committee looked at various schemes of design. We finally ended up looking at 5 schemes and selecting one, which they will go over tonight. The project, we know now, is up to $126 million. And what the committee did really, I mean, the committee did a lot of work. Alan Well, who was the chairman of the committee, also did a lot of work. I have to give him credit. But I mean, we looked at different designs. We looked at possibly closing King Street. We looked at the safety involved. We had to hire a construction company. And parking, there were a lot of issues raised by committee members. It was not an easy process. But I have to tell you that all the committee members, they did do their due diligence and put a lot of time. In fact, even right now, I don't think everybody kind of agrees on the final plan, but you know, we could have went on for months and years coming up with a final plan, because every time somebody sits down, they have another idea. Okay, we selected a plan that would have the least disruption to the students, a plan that would provide the most security for the students, the highest reimbursement rate, which is 60% because we're renovating and building new. So that's what gives us the 60% reimbursement rate. The safety issues that we raised. Is anybody here from Turner? Okay, so Turner will be here. They'll go over the safety issues. They were selected from 4 construction companies. They were the final choice. All 4 construction companies were major construction companies, all certified by the state, contractors certified by the state. I don't know if I mentioned this, we looked at closing King Street as an option. Some people were in favor of it. I, for one, was not, and that was not an option to be used because closing King Street would have turned Main Street into a nightmare, which it already is. We looked at playing fields. We discussed the gym size, the lab sizes, the shops. A tremendous amount of time and effort was put in by everybody to this project. At this point, the only available option, as far as I'm concerned, and I speak, I'm sure, for all the committee members, for the Board of Ed, for the administration, is to go ahead and move this project forward. I mean, these kids and the staff are in deplorable conditions. This project has been going on for a long time. It's finally moved forward, and we need to create a sound learning environment for these kids and for the teachers to teach in. There's not much we can do about yesterday to fix the problems. We can only work on tomorrow, and I think it's time that we move this project forward and provide the environment that these students need. The committee members, so you know, we're made up of Board of Education, Town Council, citizens from the community, the administrative staff from the Board of Ed, and some town administration. You know, let's get it moving. Let's not try to reinvent the wheel. I know there's been some talk about having one high school, and you know, this is the time or the forum to discuss that. But I really think it's time that we move forward, get this high school going, because it's going to take almost 2 or 3 years to do. And we just don't want to lose out on the bonding. There's a time frame involved, which I won't get into because Craig and they'll get into it. I'm sure your questions will go to them. But again, the entire board, the entire subcommittee, the entire Building Needs Committee is in favor of this project. We need to move this project forward. It's been long enough. It started in 2010. It's 6 years in the making. Let's just move it forward. Thank you. Next.
We had asked the Board of Education, actually the superintendent, how the project fits in with the Board of Education's long-range planning on school facilities. So to speak to that point, Superintendent Robinson is here. Thank you.
You're going to be hearing about the physical plans for the building. You're going to see some schematics, some designs. A lot of work and background have gone into this. And part of our work has been to look at the ed specs, the specifications that will suit the ideal educational learning environment for our students. The long-term planning for the board includes having all students in Stratford be well-educated in 21st century skills, which include collaboration, problem solving, all the higher order thinking skills, and be ready for a career and college. So as we move in this direction, a facility can either aid or hinder reaching those goals. A building built in the 1920s with very small classrooms hinders meeting those goals. A little bit later, after you've seen the design, I'm going to take you into classroom and show you the difference in the kinds of learning that these students will have that will lead them to the kind of collaborative educational program that they will have. You will also, one of the other goals we have is we have a wonderful program called Alpha for our students who are not as highly motivated in a large high school environment and need a smaller environment, a more personalized environment. But one of the problems we have is being able to meet their educational needs off-site. This facility will provide a wonderful setting for them and will give them the opportunity to be able to take the kinds of courses they need to reach their goals and to be graduating also. Additionally, you'll see in the design that there are specialized spaces that we simply do not have at this point. We are working out of a modular culinary program right now, and you'll see that that is going to be changed. We have facilities such as woodworking and automotive that desperately need the upgrading. So many of the core facilities here, such as the cafeteria, the gymnasium, are really not meeting the needs of our current population. So as the Stratford population of students grows, we also need to be moving forward so our students have the very best possible education that we can provide, and we'll be very proud of this project. And I will be back a little bit later to show you what the classrooms will look like. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call up Antonazzi Associates to present the design of the new Stratford High School.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize ahead of time for the cold that I have, so bear with me, please. My name is George Perham, and I'm a principal at Antonazzi Associates, and also a resident of town of Stratford, and also very proud to say that I'm an alumni of 1970 from Stratford High School. Our firm, as was mentioned, was hired going on 4 or 5 years ago now, and we've come a long way to design what we're calling a state-of-the-art, and what will be a state-of-the-art high school for the students of the future in Stratford High School. So the first slide is just to give you some orientation of what you're about to see and how it develops on the site. Can we see? Okay, so this obviously is the present high school. North Parade is in this location. Main Street, of course, over here. And this is King Street, along the back of the high school as we presently know it. The parking lot that goes along the back and along the side of the high school, and then the fields that reside towards the back of the west side, if you will, of King Street. So if we come down a little bit lower in the airplane, so to speak, the red lines define all the property lines that surround Stratford High School. And as you can see, the high school is very tight on all sides. The north side, there's a small parking lot that we probably all cut through at one time in our life. North Parade, we're very close to the front of the main road to the high school. On the south side, we're very close to properties here. The town has acquired this little piece of property. And then in the back, of course, the fields as they sit today. This upper field not used that much anymore. And then the local residents that surround the existing property. So just an overview of what the school would look like in the future. Everything pretty much on this side that you see in the gray and or the red hatched area is the existing high school as it stands in this red outline. So Turner will talk a little bit further about the phasing, but the initial component of the project is a 3-story academic and administration wing. And then the second phase, again in big blocks of phases, the existing school, the majority of the existing school will be knocked down and demolished. The third phase, we lost something. What happened?
I advanced you here.
Oh, so then here the new school would be built, and then the final phase is the renovation component of it. As you can see, we have parking on the north side, very little parking, that most likely be faculty. Parent drop-off possibly at this front area where the academic building is. Around the back side would be potentially bus drop-off. This is another main entrance where we have relocated the existing, I should say, architrave that's now proudly faces the front of the school. And this, as was mentioned before, is the new civic entrance leading into the auditorium, gymnasium, and all those other common components that make up the high school. And then over here would be the new, hopefully, turf field that will be directly accessible to the gymnasium, which is right in this block of land right here. Next slide. Yep, please. So what I thought would be helpful is to just break down the building a little bit for you and then show you the overview. So as mentioned before, if you can imagine, once again, this is King Street, and the east side of the property and the existing school is over here where these titles are, excuse me. So the main entrance to the building, that would be either parental drop-off here or a bus drop-off here. This here block is all administration, so the principal, assistant principals, secretarial space, and so on. The center portion is the nursing area, and this final is the guidance space. Over to the left of the main entrance, and the only really common space that's happening on this side of the building is the cafeteria and its kitchen area. And this is what we would call all the back of the house, the loading, the electrical, mechanical, stair halls, loading dock off the back of the piece of property here. Then we have some resource room and some tech ed rooms over here. This hallway comes down. This is all on the first floor. So this hallway sort of, not in half, but bisects the longitudinal component of the plan. And then once again, this is a front to back elevation. So the idea is, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, a security guard would be posted right in the front of the building and basically have a 180-degree view of anybody coming into the building. We've developed what's known as a sally port here from a security point of view, where, God forbid, something should happen, that person can be confined in this one little tiny space. But there's good visibility in all axes of the school now. Next slide. The second floor is the first floor that we start having classrooms. And the second floor is the only floor that connects over to the east side of the property to the existing school and the new additions. So what we've done is just to give you an idea of all the different academics up here. We have English, and then we have world language, and we have social studies and business. So those will be residing up on the second floor. And then we have 4 main large stair halls, so the children, the young students have access, pretty accessible to them no matter what classroom they are, both vertically and horizontally. So as you can see, it's a very, very compact plan, pretty simple rectangle, if you will. Bathrooms on both ends, and then there's an elevator for ADA access in the center of the building. And then up on the third floor is where we have our science rooms, which are the darker color. And then we have our math rooms, which are the lighter color. And then other circulation spaces around the perimeter, as I mentioned before. And then resource rooms that are scattered throughout the third floor. Once again, as you can see, the stairwells coming up through the building. And this is, what we would identify as a donut-shaped corridor, but once again, very good views from a security point of view down both sides of the corridors going into the classrooms. So then if we come over to the other side, on the east side of the Kings Highway, so once again, this is Kings Highway, and this is going on North Parade over towards the Town Hall. The existing gym, if you will, just to give you a little bit of an orientation, this is the entrance into the gym as we know it today. And the gym comes from this point pretty much all the way over to here. That gym will be renovated and become the new auxiliary gym. The Alpha program that Dr. Robinson spoke about will be in this area. So it's a little bit of their, call it a village, if you will, of where they would reside for all their learning and all the other stuff. So they're more in tune with the rest of the school system. Over here is the locker room for the gymnasium. We have a large gymnasium that sits over 1,000, if I recall. We have an auditorium that'll be larger than one today that's sized for the population of the school today. And over here we have the music and the choral room. In this ed, this is more of the tech ed. We have a restaurant in culinary arts. And then in the corner here, we have a lecture hall. This will be the main entrance coming into this assembly area for both the auditorium, the gymnasium, and then this is another entrance coming off of North Parade. And then right in this location is a little store, a school store, and then out here we're suggesting that this is restaurant seating, if you will, for evening activities. And then the only thing happening on the second floor of the existing building is this is where the new media center will be. Excuse me, this is the bridge, by the way, and this is King Street. So the new media center, bathrooms, of course, and then some more humanities courses and so on over in this area. And then required needs beavers and so on. I forgot to mention before, there's a large stair. So once the students come across the bridge, they can either go down the stair, and then there's an elevator here that serves at the side of the building. So the west side academic area is 3 stories, and this is only 2 stories. So now that I've flooded you with all sorts of information, just to put it in perspective, so on the first floor, we are not connected. King Street flows through the center. Main entrance, as I mentioned before. Another main entrance into the commons part of the building. Once again, this is where the new architrave, the existing architrave, new location is, and then this is the civic entrance over here from King Street and also the main parking lot area. On the second floor, as mentioned before, this is the only floor that connects, and as you can see, there's a corridor that comes all the way down. So the media center, as soon as you get over the bridge, are very attainable to the students that are in the academic building. And then up on the third floor, it resides on its own and strictly just academic space. From an aesthetic point of view, we developed this slide, this perspective for us to not only study the building itself, but its associated relationship to the existing town hall. So this is as real as we can mimic the scale and colors and so on of the town hall. So as you can see, this is Main Street, and this is where North Parade dumps out into Main Street. This is that large community center entrance. This is the lecture hall with a large canopy over the top of it. And you can see the gymnasium popping up over here, the auditorium here, and then these are those classrooms I spoke about before, the culinary arts, and so on. Next slide. So this I thought was good to show, to really get, you'd never be able to possibly see the school from this vantage point, but this is what we would call a flat on elevation. So this is the entire length of the school. And as you can see, this piece right here is the existing that will reside and be renovated. These are the auto shop and carpentry. And this is, and I'll show you a little bit later, the old entrance relocated to its new location. The bridge as it crosses King Street, and then the more civic part of the building. Next slide. So just a little bit, to show you a little bit more detail.
Sure. Can you speak up?
I'm sorry, can you hear? Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Just sit down.
I know you don't feel well.
Sorry about that. I apologize. You want me to start over? No, I'm kidding. So this is the main entrance in towards that the academic area. Once again, this is the administration. This is the cafeteria. We have a nice canopy that kind of follows all the way along here to get people from the cars over in the parking lot all the way along the glass into the main entrance. This is one of the main stairs that goes up actually to the roof for maintenance point of view. The third floor window treatment, we talked about this earlier in our meeting. One of the councilmen had a question on the size of the windows, and as you can see, on the third floor, the windows are somewhat punched through, what we would call they're about 5 or 6 feet wide or so. Down here, they're the same scale as an individual unit, but they're in threesomes. So what would happen is if these could or possibly be fixed windows right here. And then these are just windows of interest. So as you vertically transverse the school, you would have those windows inside the stair hall. So that's one main entrance. Thought this view would be important to you folks. This is the King Street entrance, and of course this is the bridge going over. This is not totally defined yet. We are still working on its design and its development, but the idea is that it'll be a free-floating bridge that gets all the way across between 12 to 14 feet wide. There's an entrance here, as Lisa mentioned at our earlier meeting. There's several entrances to the exterior of the building, but they're only there for means of egress. By the fire codes, we need to provide safe exit to the exterior in case of a mishap or a fire. So there's a lot of doors that go out of the building, but they're not going to be accessible as they are today. If you come to the high school, you can only get in certain doors in certain parts of the day. This is the existing auto shop and carpentry area. If we keep on going towards the east. So this is what I came in and out of for 4 years when I was going to high school here, and I'm really glad to see that we're able to move this over. Very important entrance. This is basically the center of that west building, right opposite the parking. So if you folks are getting out of your car right now where you reside and where you're sitting today, this is what you would see. We're going to be treating this with kid gloves. We've got one of the best contracting companies, Turner Construction, I consider in the state, and they're already getting their arms around how we're going to be relocating that. And we're not only going to relocate the architrave, but we're also going to relocate the medallion that's above it. And then this, last but not least, is the large civic entrance into the auditorium. And one may ask why so many doors. The code requires us to design width of egress openings from doors both going in and coming out. And so there's a large amount of glass and doors. This will be a beautifully lit a story and 3/4 high lobby leading into the auditorium, which you can sort of see in the background. This is just a pair of exit doors coming out of the gymnasium that's required by law. And of course, we have to have ADA access. It won't be this unfriendly, I would tell you right now. We just blocked it in for a placeholder. Next slide, please. And then this is coming around the corners, the entrance I just spoke about with the handicap ramp. So now if we're on North Parade, and I know it's not grass, but that's the best we can do for the short period of time. This is the other entrance coming into that Civic Center. This is going to be a beautiful lecture hall that could replace the auditorium when we don't need such a large space. And once again, culinary and restaurant teaching is over this area. And here you can see the auditorium popping up above the roof. And I believe that's it. Any questions? You want to do questions now? Or you want to wait?
We can do some questions now.
Okay. Any questions? Yes?
I think you did a great job, being that I'm assuming the students will be located to the new portion across the street. So it seems like there'll be no asbestos abatement, and this building will be knocked down.
That's correct to an extent. Yes, the beauty about the project, one of the beauties about the project is that the way it was designed, and I think this is one of the reasons why it took us so long to get to the end result, because we've studied many, many different ways of designing a project. One of the beauties that you picked up on is that we can literally build the entire academic and administration wing, or new building, if you will, without touching this existing school. So this part of it, it'll almost be like nothing's ever happening. So you're going to see construction equipment, but for the first, I think it's 18 months or so, it'll be a brand new building built. And then over the summer, that following year, the students would now go into that building. And the part where you're not totally correct is that there is going to be abatement, but the good news is because we're doing a wholesale demolition, we don't have to intricately debate any hazardous materials. It's going to come down in, I would call, more chunks, if you will. So it's not as expensive as if we try to get it out while students are in play. We do have a little bit of overlap there on the renovation part, which is where the old gymnasium is, and we're building the locker rooms and so on and so forth. But Turner is working on that phasing and how we're going to be doing that along with us and correct. So we'll be doing that and keeping everybody safe. Thank you. Yes, Tina. Oh, sir.
Thank you. With the recent dramatic decreases in the price of solar energy, is that being considered to put solar, electricity, hot water, and so on in the building from the get-go?
Yes, it is. To the extent that we can in the building and the design and The economics allow us to, absolutely.
I had the pleasure of visiting Stratford High School only because it was wonderful to see the children and adults. The building is absolutely terrible, falling apart. So I appreciate all the design work that you've done. My question is specifically about classroom size. When I was there and witnessed the classrooms, I saw students sitting on counters, against counters, shoved every which way. How much bigger are the classrooms? How much of an increase have you made from what was to what is? And specifically in the automotive and carpentry classes where I saw students crammed wanting those courses. So I know culinary is getting a whole big wing and there's going to be a restaurant and that's great for PR. But as you know, part of the technical high school system gets 1,000 applicants at Platt Tech. They can't all go there. So they come to Stratford High looking for those trades. So how big are these places going to be? How much bigger from what I saw?
The new classrooms, first of all, you hit on a great point, because that was one of the problems in the beginning, very early on when we first got the project, and we were looking at the existing feasibility study. The classrooms were going to be way undersized. So that was one of the initial things that started driving the cost of the school up, is because the classrooms were very undersized. And that was also one of the things that drove knocking the existing building down, because you couldn't manipulate the corridor to get the classrooms big enough. So to answer your question, all the classrooms are now sized to be between 800 square feet, right around 800 square feet, which is what you're allowed to do, which nicely suffices 28 to 30 students. Today, just to give you an idea, there's some classrooms existing that are only 450 square feet, and that's probably where you saw the students sitting on the windowsills. So that is all driven by the state of Connecticut, allocation of square footage per student, and we're subscribing to that. In regards to the shops, they are going to be, I'm going to say 21st centralized, if you will, and so they're going to have all new state-of-the-art auto mechanics as well as the carpentry. So all of that is being upgraded. The whole idea here is that when we get done, we're not going to be looking backwards, we're going to be looking very much forward.
And specifically the computer labs in automotive and woodshop areas are going to be maximized.
They're going to be what?
They're going to be maximized.
Yes.
The computer component.
Yes.
Yes, George. How many students will this now accommodate? And I know this sounds like a silly question, but were there any, I know there's not enough room, being in Lower Fairfield County, a lot of the schools have pools. So was there not enough room to put a swimming pool in? Because we wouldn't have it at either high school now.
Yeah, a pool is first of all, I don't think it has any reimbursement to it. So if you did a pool, it would be all on your own money. And secondly, it would probably end up being a roof pool like in the Marriott, because there really is no ground space. The population, once again, there's a lot of things that are mandated by the state. So we're driven from a design point of view on the size of a school. There needs to be a demographic study with an outlook of 5 years or so. And that has been done. So the school has been designed for 1,100 students. Yes.
Since I am such a stickler on this facade, I would like to have with regard to the front area. This is, I was familiar with this was given out. Is this your intention of putting it still on the side of the building?
Can you just go back to that slide?
Pardon?
There you go.
That these are going to be there. Will the red doors be there, or are they going to be all glass?
They're most likely going to be all glass. Those red doors were not original. Those were not historic. Those doors were replacement doors of some very old wood doors that were, I think they might have been there when I was here. They're 2 3/4 inches thick, and they are no longer existent. Those doors are like an acrylic door, so there's nothing historical about the doors. So what we wanted to try to do is to get more light back into the school, is provide more light and have more accent on the architrave, so that below the architrave is more transparent to make the architrave more, the glass doors are more transparent to make the architrave more important.
All right, so then, am I to understand the way that photo was there, or your screen is, this is at the top of it?
That's correct.
Okay, and then the design here, the windows, and I'll play around with
That's going to be moved. We're literally taking that off of the building and moving it to the new building.
So basically, the doors are going, and basically this is what, but this on the top is what's going to be moved.
Yes, yeah, it's very difficult to articulate every single thing in that photograph that's on the rendering, but the rendering is meant to be the exact replica of what's there today. The only thing that will happen that will help it is that it'll be cleaned. So when it comes down, it gets steam cleaned or however, whatever the process is, and then it has to be waterproofed. So when it goes up, it's going to look brand new. Yep, yep.
You said this building is designed for a population of 1,100?
Correct.
And what's the current population of the school?
960.
960.
You have a question way back there?
Yes, this is about my third time hearing the presentation, and I thought I'd hear something different, and I thought I did. It sounds like a great plan. Only asking that we get it moving forward once and for all, because we do need to see this school up. We need things updated for the students because we need the technology. One of the things I might want to add, mostly for Representative Robinson, would be to make sure the first year, especially, we have a technology person full-time on board because the technology is going to be so sophisticated, from my understanding, that like any other technology, it doesn't work well the first time out of the gate. So just have a good technical support person on premise to take care of some of the hiccups that may happen during the implementation of the technology. Other than that, it's a great plan. I'm all for it. Let's go with that.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to go back to talking about the student capacity. I myself graduated from Stratford High in 1983. We were a class of 365. We have students in grades coming up to the rank that the size of the grade has increased, as evident at Nichols School, that there's this whole sixth graders in portals outside of the school. So if you're talking, this can't even accommodate 300 kids per grade at this point, and then that would be 1,200 students. We only have one shot at this. Is there a way to add a fourth floor to accommodate and look, and I don't know if the district has looked at how many students we have now coming up through fourth, fifth, second, third grade. My twins are in one of the largest classes, and each time in each grade, they've had to add additional classes and pull away from the previous grade. So we're having larger sizes come in. This, at 1,100 students, that doesn't even accommodate 300 students per grade. Is there talk that the capacity could be expanded maybe by adding a fourth floor or adding a third floor to this current site?
Yeah, without this answer, you know, in our world as architects is a very long answer, but I'll try to make it very short. Once again, the state, you know, when you're involved in getting state reimbursement, the state dictates the way you go about designing the school and the parameters that you use to design the school. So what the Board of Education had to do is hire a consultant to do a demographic study. That demographic study unveils the future, once again, to a 8-year look ahead. Okay, and then they take that 8-year look ahead, and we design to the maximum in that 8 years. So and then once you do that, the allocation of square footage of construction per student is dictated to us by the state. So there's a very long and sophisticated process that we have to go through as architects, along with the rest of the team, on how do you get X number of square feet per student and have the school work and fit all the academic. So we don't have a choice of just going up to the 4th floor. If the town wanted to do that and pay for that entire 4th floor, that's another situation. But it's typically, in all the towns that we work in, that's typically not the case. Yes, sir.
So what you're saying is that your 8-year projection projected 1,100 students in the school.
Correct.
Back there,
Yep. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the science labs. Will they be considered full size and allow
Absolutely. Once again, all the science labs, along with all the other classrooms, the way they're going to be taught and what they're going to use to be taught is all state-of-the-art 21st century, so yeah, absolutely. Yes?
I had a couple of questions. What's the present capacity of the gymnasium?
750?
No, I think it's a little less. I think it's about 680.
680.
You know, when we have a basketball game, we try to cap it at 680 paid entrance. So with the basketball teams, it probably is total about 700.
Okay, like 700.
What's the size of the civic entrance, the 1.5-story part of the building?
What's this, what?
The size of it. What's the dimension of it?
I can't.
How big is it? How big is the civic entrance on the east side?
The length of it?
How many square feet is it?
I don't know, but it's part of the hall, I'm not sure. You're talking about just the lobby itself?
Yeah, you call it a civic entrance?
Right.
1.5-story area?
Right, you're talking about that lobby?
Tables outside of the auditorium?
The lobby?
Yeah.
Like outside here?
Yeah.
I would say it's probably equal to about 1.5 times more than what we have here today.
And how large is in terms of capacity, how large is the new auditorium?
The new auditorium is designed to
550.
550.
And what's the capacity of this auditorium? 700?
No, it's not 700.
Let's go.
Similar.
You know, I'm not sure.
That 550 number is set by the state. They only reimburse you up to 50% of the student population. So with 1,100 students, you only get 550.
So what is it now?
You know, I'm not sure what you guys.
I believe it's very close.
What's the capacity of the additional lecture hall?
96.
How much?
96.
Just under.
The lecture hall, will it have a staging area like this?
It won't be a lifted stage, but it'll be a presentation space. Yes.
What will be involved in that presentation space? Lighting, etc.?
Yes.
So what's your anticipated use of that space?
What's the use of the space?
The lecture hall is meant to be for both for outside as well as inside scholastic uses. So instead of having, if you don't need to have the entire school down into the auditorium, it could be for smaller groups.
Are there any classes that have 96 students in them?
Music theory might move in there for a few classes.
Music theory would have a class of 96?
Yeah.
How often do they meet?
I don't know.
What does the state say the optimum class size is for high school students? How many students should be in the optimum class size?
The state has a set.
Right. What do you say, Doctor?
I would say an optimum size. The state only limits the size, and I'll talk about classrooms in just a little bit. The size for a lab is 24, and 28 to 30 is class size in many high school classes.
So what's the optimum size?
The optimum size is probably no more than 28.
No more than 28. So is there some optimum size? Is it 15? Is it 17?
Well, if you're dealing with an AP class, you're going to have probably smaller numbers. So you had advanced placement class. Or
Doctor, what would that number be?
That will vary with the popularity of the class, but simply by the fact you get to an AP level, you typically have fewer students participating. So that could be 20 students, that could be 15 students, just because of the process of getting there. ECE, which is our early college, that's limited to 15 by the university.
That's called ECE.
May I also say the use of the lecture halls, the state is, which is your earlier question, the state is moving toward new graduation requirements, and when they go in effect, there will be a project that students must do. And my experience in my previous district, that lecture hall was perfect for the students to do their individual presentations of their research, and would have anywhere from family and other students watching. It was perfect for it.
Did you say that's a requirement now or a future requirement?
It's a future requirement.
And the present class size here is 28 to 30 students?
Oh, yeah, 30.
Larger than that?
30 in many of them.
Yes.
Hi. I wanted to share something with Dr. Robinson and regarding class size. The research regarding class size is varied. However, class sizes for honors classes and high-performing students can be much higher. So a 28 or 30-person class for a high-performing honors class is not unheard of, and it's nothing to be alarmed at. That is not an alarming classroom size. However, when you're dealing with students who have social emotional issues, learning disabilities, you want those class sizes to be smaller. So it's an upside down triangle that we're explaining where there's AP courses where there's smaller numbers, and then the general population is in larger classes. So you need to advocate for smaller classes for those students as well. So that's where you get into it. There's a ton of research around this. Read about it and inform yourselves. It's really, really great stuff out there. It actually helps higher performing students learn better to be in those bigger environments where they can have discourse.
Okay, we're going to save the rest of the questions for the public forum afterwards. I'd like to move on to the timeline of the Stratford High School project. There's another mic somewhere. I'm not sure where it is. So for questions, we'll pass that one around.
Councilman Chase told it right there. Right here. He's got it in the suit jacket.
I'm Brian Green, the Project Controls Manager there. We're your owner's project manager on this job. Working with Antonazi, Turner, and then the rest of the building committee to make sure that the building project goes smoothly, that everything runs on time, and then hopefully we are bringing it in as close to budget as possible. I'm going to provide you just a few kind of key dates here. We are right now tracking a list of 60 plus items in just our design budget, our design schedule. Ty then has a bunch of other construction line items that he'll be tracking. So if you move to the next slide. Our design is kind of anticipated to be complete by the end of this year. We have 2 milestones within that. One is the end of design documents. That's slated for about June 2016. At that point, we'll be going to the state and doing what's called a DDR review, where they're going to look at the documents, give us some feedback, and we'll incorporate those as we go forward. Then the next milestone in design is the construction documents, or CD, complete. As I said, that's going to be towards the end of the year. We'll be bringing all these to the Building Needs Committee, to the Town Council, to the Board of Ed for their final approval. That's required by the state. And then once that's done, we'll be going out to bid and starting construction sometime late 2015. Late 2016. I do have a typo there. Late 2016, early 2017 is when we started construction. As kind of was alluded to before, we have 3 kind of different phases. One is that West Academic Building. That's going to be complete the earliest so that we can move the students in there. And we're anticipating sometime spring, around February of 2018. Once we move them in there, then the renovations to the east side of the Civic Building will start. Ty's going to talk about that in just a second. And we anticipate that the main portion of the Civic Building will be done around August of 2019. And then the last piece, the Tech Ed and the auxiliary gym, will follow a couple months later after that.
The start of construction was December 2015?
That was a typo.
That was a typo.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
It was 2016, 2017.
The end of this year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So again, this is just reviewing a little bit what some of the graphics that George had showed you earlier. This is the new classroom addition we call the West Building. This is the existing gymnasium, Tech Ed. This is reconfigured. Locker rooms are currently here and over here. And then the red outline is the existing classrooms, auditorium that will be demolished and superseded by the blue configuration in the back. So as we refer to it, this is phase 1. This is the first phase that will be built. Then we'll come over and demolish the existing school after the kids migrate into the new addition. And we'll build this. And this phase 3 is actually distributed over the life of the project, and I'll get into that in more detail on another slide. And here's that other slide. So again, looking at the timeline, start of construction, December 16, January 17, right here. All we'll be doing is this first phase, except for the summer. The summer period here is when we're going to start some of our renovation. We want to take advantage of all the summers because that's when the school's not occupied. It's the best time to do renovations of the occupied building. So following the color coordination here, purple. So this is the second floor above the tech ed that's over here. It's currently some classrooms. We'll do that renovation over the first summer. This gets converted into the media center as well as, I think, some art classrooms, Lisa?
Yes.
Yes. So we'll do that. We'll have to maintain egress. We're going to put a temporary stair out here because at some point we're going to have to knock down the rest of the building where the corridor runs through. So that's just sort of a temporary consideration. At the end of this project, we then have to go through this red line is the demolition phase. So there's abatement and demolition of this existing building here, phase 2. There'll be some overlap as we'll probably demolish heading one side to the other. As we start demolition here, we'll finish over here, and then we'll follow the same sequence, starting foundations, and so that's why you get an overlap between the demolition and the new construction. We get another summer here, which means another opportunity to do renovation. So we're going to look to do, at that point in time, the renovation of the tech ed, the auto and carpentry shops, and so that's that opportunity. Then we continue on with the construction of the new phase 2, and then the last summer will be the completion of this addition as well as the remainder of the renovation. This is a considerable chunk for the summer, so this will extend into the fall. However, the goal will be to do all the asbestos work over the summer so that that's complete by the time the students get back, and then it'll be more of just finishing the fit out and finishes once school's back in session. Okay, let's move on from there. Okay, go back to Janet.
Hey, Dr. Robbins.
I'm going to take you now into see the classroom, so you get some idea of, you've seen the layout of this school, the outside, the inside, and now I want to take you into some classrooms. So Lisa, let's go with the first one. That is not it. The small classrooms were designed, the 600 square foot classrooms were designed for very orderly, sit in rows, no movement, an educational model that was very appropriate, I believe, as people tell me, for the industrial kind of educational process. So this is not what we're going to do. So let's go to the next one. We're going to leave that behind. You asked some questions about the size and design of the classrooms, and those are very important questions to us. Currently, the classrooms are too small for 21st century learning. We can't group students, we can't move them around because they were set up as the one you saw earlier. And when you have 30 students in a 600 square foot space, as one of you have said, you saw kids sitting on windowsills and so forth, they just don't fit. The average classroom is between 600 and 700 square feet, but you did hear that there are some that are 450. The new classrooms, the proposed classrooms, would be 850 square feet, which allow for more flexibility. We can move, group, do small groups or larger groups. And that's what we're looking for the 21st century skills. Also, it allows for students to be able to have their mobile devices and so forth. And we want students to be able to be in a learning environment that is preparing them for the kind of college and work environment that is going on right now, which is much more collaborative, doing a lot of work online. And so technology is going to be a major tool in this flexible classroom. So this is a little different look than the one you saw before, but it isn't fixed. I want you to see what it looks like as it can be moved around. It's a silent film, but watch it. So you can have this type of arrangement where they are working in singly, they move into groups. The groups can be moved around in different ways. Very quickly, very easily, depending on what the purpose of the instruction is. And out come the devices. In many cases, the students will meet together in their groups. They'll be designing a project. They may then move into another area to do the research for the projects, coming back together to check in with their group, as you might in some corporate world right now. All the classrooms will have smart boards, or the latest version of the smart boards. All the classrooms will be will have the Wi-Fi necessary for the students to use their devices. We will have state-of-the-art technology, so the kids, which will be phenomenal, because in this building that's been a real challenge to have that available. So the classrooms will be flexible. The classrooms will be larger. It is possible to have different little pods. And some classrooms, especially in the business department, may set up where the students actually have offices to the outside and then do some of their group work in the middle. So the furnishings and everything we do will be related to how, what the goals are of that particular classroom. Did we have one more slide? No. Okay. Okay. So we spoke earlier about the chemistry labs. Labs do have a restriction of 24 for safety. So we have 3 chemistry labs that are really not fully operational. These labs are very outdated. We are not able to do the kinds of lab work we would like to do. So we want to increase those to 5 chemistry labs that are fully equipped, safety, and meet all safety requirements. And these will be, our teachers are going to go nuts over this. They're going to be so excited because they're really going to be able to do the kind of hands-on work that we currently cannot do to meet the needs of these kids. So we're very excited about the possibilities. Is that it? Oh, forgot about the Alpha program. I talked about that earlier. Thank you. Currently, I mentioned the Alpha program, which is the program, it's our alternative ed program. It's housed at Birdseye, and the disadvantage is that it's hard to offer the students the quantities of classes that they need in order to meet the graduation requirements. So we're doing a combination of on-site teaching and online learning. But what we'd like to do is have the kids have greater access to the variety of things that are offered at the high school, yet still give them that intimacy of having a small group, because the large situation has been difficult for them. So what we can do is, you heard where that will be located in the new building. They will still have their own area, and teachers can come in to teach the classes that are here at the school, so they have access to all that this school has to offer and still be able to be in the smaller environment. So we feel that this is going to be an excellent resource to help us get these kids to our goal of 100% graduation rate. And it's important for us that we get them there. So we're very excited about, in particular, the ability to have these larger classes that gives us a great deal of flexibility. Classroom size, rather, gives us a great deal of flexibility. So, do you want me to save questions for later or take them now?
Save later. Yeah, save. How big is the Alpha program?
The Alpha program varies, but it's about 48 students.
What is the program?
It's an alternative program for high school students that are not adjusting well to the larger classroom. So it's an alternative program. Yes?
How many classrooms does Stratford High currently have for non-Alpha students, obviously, and how many will the new school have for the non-Alpha students?
You have the classroom size? I mean, classroom number?
61?
Is it 61?
Roughly. I just pulled out.
Is that the projected or what we
Six-
currently have?
64. This is what we're projecting. 64. I'm sorry, I took out the wrong number for Alpha.
Okay, so 64.
That's not for non-Alpha students?
For non-Alpha. We had 71. I just pulled out the 6 Alphas.
And then how many do we have in Stratford High now?
What's in Stratford High School now? Do you know? Do you have that number?
Yes.
56? 56? So it's quantity and size.
That doesn't include the lecture hall.
Right, which will give us a lot of versatility. Yes.
I have one last safety question. I know right now efforts are being made for a dental clinic to be in this school, and there's some teacher and parent concern regarding the students being exposed to radiation in the surrounding classrooms. I may have missed it in the architectural presentation. Will there be a dental clinic on site, and is there discussion with the builders around where it's located and the safety materials to minimize exposure of radiation to the surrounding rooms?
We don't have a plan for the dental clinic in the school at this moment.
Oh, because I was shown a section right next to my daughter's science lab where people were coming in and speaking about the clinic coming in. So I didn't know if this new...
You're talking about a permanent location for the dental clinic?
There is in the new plans for the building, in the new plans for the building, in the center of the first floor, where the school nurse will be located, there is a space that has been designated as the dental lab.
So there will be screenings, as currently screenings are done.
Yep.
By the visiting lab. Yes.
Hi, Doctor. Doctor, do you know the total academic space we have now versus the new proposed building?
The total academic space?
And then the total administrative versus old and new?
I don't have those numbers. Now, Jack, do you know what the total...
The total building now, I don't know.
Administrative space?
No, the total building.
He has both. He has for administrative
Academic
space and also for the academic space. So if we're averaging around 600 a room,
I believe it's about 180,000 total square feet right now, and we'll be moving to about 235,000.
thank you.
If an academic, I mean,
I
you've got a
don't
new
know the-
gymnasium,
I
you'll
don't
have
know
two
the-
gymnasiums, you'll have this new meeting room.
I don't know those breakouts, I only know the total.
Yeah, okay. And I noticed in the flexible classroom, which was very impressive, that equipment and so forth, would that be part of this project cost?
Yes, FF&E is included in the project cost, and that will be bid out to bid separately.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Let's move on to the health and safety precautions of the project. And that's by Turner.
Okay. In an ideal world, every building would be built on a green field and in a pasture, and we'd be there working all by ourselves and not interacting with the general public. That's not reality. The particularly in the school world. We specialize in schools. We do a lot of schoolwork throughout the state and throughout the country. And because of that, we've developed systems to minimize our impact. And obviously our goal is to be as isolated and unobtrusive as possible. But the fact that it's a different activity than what everybody is used to, by nature, we can't be invisible, but we want to minimize our impact. So some of the strategies that we use, first and foremost, is obviously isolate our construction from school operations. We do that with the new addition. We're going to have fencing around, and that's pretty straightforward. Within the renovation, we're going to have to install hard partitions, which is temporary walls, isolating and separating our work zone from the operating school environment. Along with just the hard partitions, we supplement that with a lot of signage so that it's very clear that it's a construction zone and people are not to enter it. If there's a door, it would be a locked door anyway, but and purely there for egress or for controlled access. One of the things that we've also realized is on most campuses that one of the most hectic times is during parent drop-off and pickup. So it's really true for any of our school projects. We prohibit deliveries from any kind of construction delivery during those times. If a truck shows up, it has to circle the area until that period of time is over. Another consideration is construction. Obviously, there's a certain amount of dust and debris associated with that process. We want to isolate our impact, and we do that through a filtration system. On existing equipment, we'll put pre-filters on that so that before the air gets into the system, it's filtered, and those are changed on a regular basis. Then we also work with the existing filters within the system, and we monitor those, and then we'll also change those on a regular basis. That's within sort of the occupied building, but another consideration is to keep the dust from migrating from the construction area to an occupied area, and we do that through negative air. That's actually something that's utilized in hospitals a lot. So we use the same idea, which is keep our area negative, which is through a system of fans with filters on them, so that dust will not migrate out of our space. It's contained in our space and gets filtered, and the air then gets put out into the atmosphere. So that if a door were to open, the air would travel from the occupied area into the construction zone, not the other way around. Dust control during construction out in the area. We have several devices, be it a misting or some chemicals that we can apply to keep dirt from dusting up in a windstorm, and as well as during demolition. There's a whole watering process that has to be implemented by the contractors, and we'll be monitoring that on a daily basis. Noisy operations, demolition, or any kind of hammering or something like that. Adjacent to classrooms, we schedule that on off hours, either at the end of the day or concentrate them over weekends or holidays. Abatement is regulated by the state, the Department of Public Health, and the requirement is that it cannot take place while school is in session unless you get a plan approved by the Department of Public Health, a site-specific plan. Now with phase 2, we're more than likely, we won't be able to complete all that over a summer, so we will have to approach the Department of Public Health on that, and the good news is that we will be able to, I think, very cleanly isolate our activity so that there's no interaction between the two spaces. Renovation work, as I talked about earlier, concentrating that over the summers, and so we'll do that to minimize the impact on the occupied areas of the school. Next slide. So again, this is somewhat repetitive, but this is just to show you a little bit of some of the tactics. This is the chain link fence that we would use to isolate the construction zone during phase 1. We'll have our staging areas within the fence line. This is the area designated for tradesman parking. The existing school parking is here, and up here. We could have upwards of 100 to 150 men on the job, and those would not, obviously we can't commingle those cars with your parking, so we have to create our own parking lot here or off-site. Slide, please. This is phase 2, the same concept, where this is our construction fence. We'll isolate ourselves within here. We have our staging area and our tradesman parking. In this scenario, the school parking will remain here, but now with the occupancy of this new addition, we also have additional parking here and here. So you'll actually have a surplus of parking compared to what you have today. Along with the fences up here, you'll see some other notation. We will have extensive signage around the perimeter, identifying this as construction zone, hard hat area. Other techniques we use to isolate ourselves, and more importantly also to communicate to not only the school community but the public at large. We'll set up a website so that updates can be provided. We want to eliminate the curiosity factor, so if we provide the information, that should satisfy people's curiosity and keep them out of the construction zone. We also have a tradesman orientation process where we define what the rules of the site are, and that's done as soon as they arrive on site. We define the safety rules, we define the interaction with the school community rules, we define things as mundane as parking, obviously smoking, things of that nature, so that everybody knows what the rules are on site, and when those rules are not observed, we can remove somebody from the site immediately. We also, most of our school projects do a tradesman background check. You'll see that that's actually almost standard now, even as a visitor to a school. The common public, usually you have to provide your license and you go through a background check. And we would be doing that for the tradesmen as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, summers and off hours are the main opportunity to do some of the most disruptive work. Last phase. This is phase 3. Again, this is our renovation phase. We'll have 2 construction zones, if you will. Again, most of this will be happening, some of these earlier phases will be happening during the summer. We will not have any kind of fencing operations for that. This is really the last phase of phase 3 when we're doing this rear portion. We'll have some staging and parking in the front as well as a staging area in the back. And the school will use this. This is really the main artery coming in and out. The school parking will be in these areas here. All right. Want to take questions now or let's move on?
I think we're going to move on.
Okay, great.
Just for the sake of time, then in the public forum, if there are other questions.
Okay, here's just again just to summarize some of the things we've talked about. Communication, so email blasts, whether in terms of any kind of activity that might be coming up at a particular point in time, just to notify the school community of a construction operation or something that might change their schedule. Signage and maps throughout the school. If we're changing a circulation pattern, there'll be maps and notifications so that everybody is familiar with, particularly parents the first day of school. If we have a different parking configuration or something like that, we want to get that out in advance so it's not, we eliminate confusion. It's also be supplemented by some traffic control and monitors to help with that process. Usually after the first couple of days it's down to routine again. Community website will be set up at the beginning of the project. It's already been set up, but it'll be more active for the community. Notifications of any kind of change from the daily routine, and then we provide a monthly report which provide photos as well. And then within the website there's a Q&A opportunity too. If somebody has a question, someone will monitor it and get back with an answer. So now we'll move on. Who's next?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Delapiano?
Thank you. Welcome and thanks for coming out tonight to hear the presentation. We truly appreciate it. First and foremost, as you've heard tonight, between Antonazzi and Turner Construction, George and Ty did an amazing job of presenting to you some of the steps and precautions they're going to take along the way to ensure the safety of our children. And also, along those same lines, that helps us delineate how we're going to deliver education during the project. So as you've heard tonight, in a perfect setting, they'll break ground hopefully in December of this year. Finishing up at the end of February in 2018. That will allow us to deliver instruction uninterrupted until that time. At that point, it'll virtually be like a Friday. We'll end session in this existing building, and on Monday morning, the students will report to school in the new west side of the building. Now, the west side of the building is going to have just about 70 classrooms. We're going to have our math, science, English, social studies classrooms, along with administration, guidance, our school nurse, our cafeteria. Some of our pathway programs will all be located on that side of the building. As we're ready to move in there, in the summer prior to that, there's going to be some minor adjustments made to the east side of the building to make sure that the students have access through the second floor bridge and are able to access all of the classrooms that are going to be necessary on the east side of the building. At that point, once we're moved in and everything's deemed safe, the demolition will start on the area that is pretty much east of our current gymnasium all the way to North Parade Street. At that point, the only facility that we will lose and not have access to for a period of about 1 calendar year is the auditorium. So everything will remain status quo. PE classes will use the auxiliary gymnasium, as will the athletic teams. Our band and choral classes will use their current classrooms. Our shops will have the wood shop and the current auto shop to take part in. Our video production lab will remain unchanged. So all of those areas are going to have full access to the students. So it's going to be the original building and the auditorium that are going to be demolished. From there, we will, like I said, the only inconvenience we're going to have is 1 year without an auditorium, and we're currently working with and talking with other schools in the district to house our performances for orchestra, for our jazz band, for our band, for our chorus, and any drama productions, the drama production or the musical that takes place during the school year. From there, as you've heard today, there's a pretty distinct or delineated timeline. This building will then be erected back. It'll be the civic area, which will contain the new auditorium, the new gymnasium, the lecture hall, the new culinary classrooms, the restaurant seating for night events, as well as some of the practice rooms for those areas. At that point, the remaining portion of the construction, and I believe Ty touched on this, is going to take place in the summer months with just a few maybe tie-ups during the school year. And that will be the restructuring or the redesigning of the current gymnasium, our large gymnasium, to be an auxiliary gym, fitness center for our student athletes and our faculty. It will also consist of the Alpha program, as well as the redesigned and a completely updated auto and wood shops, video production, etc. I did leave out actually in this phase 1A will be the media center that will take place. So as we're ready to move into the new building, we will also have access to the media center, which will be on the east side of the street as well. I'm excited about it. I've never been through a school construction project where we get to live it and be a part of it. I was at a school where one was built next to us. I anticipate a level of excitement that builds throughout the course of the 3 years that climaxes with the students moving in to the new building and the sense of pride that all of us had when we went to high school, and the sense of pride and joy in their faces as they see what awaits them. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So this has all been the benefits. Now let's talk about the costs. If Craig could start by speaking to that, and then the finance director. will speak to that.
So the first thing I want to touch on is the reimbursement rate. I know there's been some questions on that that have been circulating in the papers, and I want to put that to rest for you, hopefully. Go to the next slide. So the reimbursement rate is set by the Connecticut General Statutes. Every year, the state looks at it and comes up with their reimbursement rate. The range is from 10 to 70% for new construction in the state, and 20% to 80% for renovation projects, energy conservation projects, and the like. Stratford for this year falls at 60.36%. So when the town council authorized the $65 million last year in May, that rate was set in. And when it went on the priority list this year, I pulled up a screenshot here of the priority list. You can see there that the 60.36 is realized. Now this is only kind of one portion of it, and I'll get into the kind of total calculation of the grant in a second. But if you can go to the next slide, please. I want to give you some context over time, how the reimbursement has changed for Stratford. So when this project was originally authorized back, I believe 2011 was when the town council voted on it, the reimbursement rate was 50% for both. They subsequently changed it so that it was a different rate for each. When you went this year, you got your 60.36%. Again, we did look at new construction as part of those schemes, and one of the reasons that we moved towards the renovation project was that higher reimbursement rate. If the project was to delay, you can see that the reimbursement rate has actually gone down between last year and this year by a couple percentage points. So the calculation of the grant is more than just the reimbursement rate. You start with the total project cost, but then there are items that are considered ineligible. So an example of an ineligible item would be work that's done on the roads. That's considered an off-site cost. Another cost that's limited eligible, so you only get 50% of your reimbursement rate, are some of your athletic facilities and some of your auditorium facilities. So you have to subtract those ineligible costs from your total project costs before you multiply by that reimbursement rate. Once you get your state reimbursement, you can do the math quickly to get your town's share. Now, a couple things that we did over the course of this project helped with line item B here. Go to the next slide. And this was special legislation that was put into place specifically for this renovations project. So the first thing that we did is we actually increased the space standard. So George had mentioned that we were allowed a certain amount by the state. We actually pushed up against that line and a little bit over it. And so we would have been penalized for that had the special legislation not gone into effect. It's actually a savings of about $8.8 million to the town to get that special legislation put in there. The second one is in a renovation project, the state does not pay for general upgrades and maintenance. So if you redo a bathroom in the same place, they're not going to consider that a new building. They're going to consider that just general maintenance of the building. And that would be an ineligible cost. So we had originally anticipated about $6 million of ineligible costs associated with this. With that special legislation, those are waived and they're fully reimbursable. So the net cost to the town that's been reported out there is about $52.6 million. The way that we calculate that out is we have $125.9 million in the total cost. We have an allowance in there for some ineligible costs, again, off-site work, utilities that will need to be moved or relocated as part of the project, athletic fields, stuff like that, gymnasium, portions of the gymnasium that the state considers limited eligible. We have then our total project eligible cost, which is multiplied by the 60.36%, and that's where you get your $56 million net cost. Sorry, $52.6 million net cost to the town. I know I ran through that fast. I'd be happy to entertain any questions right now on it before we get to the Director of Finance.
I can.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
This is a lot of great work that was done by a lot of people in legislation, so I'm just glad that you were able to show people what's going on. And I'm happy to move the project along. I'm so happy to see this. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I did put up a few people to thank for the special legislation. It really was a team effort. Last year was a unique session, as you all know, and we actually ended up getting all this kind of at the 11th hour in the special legislation session.
We have one question here.
Go ahead.
Yeah. You're the project manager, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what steps you go through to ensure that this project is not going to start increasing in costs?
Yeah, certainly. So the first thing is that we have a budget now set at $125.9 million, and so we really cannot come back to you for that. So should we see a DD estimate in a couple months that starts to creep up from where we were?
Excuse me.
Yep.
Could you stop with the acronyms?
Oh,
DDS,
sorry.
please.
Design development. It's the phase of design that we're in currently.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do an estimate like we did with a schematic design estimate a couple months ago, and the schematic design estimate is actually why we're here tonight. One of the reasons why we're here tonight to ask for that increase in the grant, because we realized that what we had originally anticipated in the conceptual design was not adequate, and we needed to increase that. But now we're set. We don't have any more opportunities with the state to really increase the grant at this point in time. So if we see in a couple months that design development review estimate comes in, then we're going to have to start taking a even deeper look at value engineering the building out, and that's removing materials, removing scope, items that we've already taken. We have already taken items out of the building in that schematic design piece that as part of this value engineering process. So that's really the next step if we start to see, again, a little bit creep in the budget as we go forward to these design development review and construction.
Have you started to do a priority list of what may have to be cut if you start to see costs increase?
No, not yet.
Okay, thank you.
If in fact you do start running over, just by chance, does the state reimbursement change, or is that locked in at this price?
So the total project cost would be $125.9 million. Let's say in the very rare case that we were going to go above that, and I can assure you that we're seeking to stay at that budget, and we have contingency amounts built into that budget to kind of help that. Then if it was over, let's say it was $127 million, that additional $2 million would be ineligible and would not receive state reimbursement.
Okay, now, if you come in under the $125 million, because as you said, you have contingencies, but
Yep.
it does contingencies, does the city still get 73, or is that then prorated?
No, that would reduce the project eligible costs. So contingency is considered an ineligible cost. You can't get reimbursed on something you don't spend. So either way, the net cost is going down to the town. It's just not going to go down as much.
Right, so the state reimbursement is locked in at this number as far as the high number goes.
Yep.
But not locked in as far as the low number goes. It can decrease depending on our final cost.
You will get 60.36% of the amount that you spend that is eligible.
Up to 125.
Up to 125,966. Yep.
Or 121,496.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'd like the Director of Finance to give us the really bad news. It's all good news.
Okay, is this on?
Yes.
The whole budget is $125.9 million. So the town is going to spend all that money. It's going to run through our books. As we spend it, we will apply for reimbursement from the state in stages. And in the end, the town will have spent $52 million, I believe, estimated $52 million of our money. That money we will bond over time. So there's cash flow. The money's going to start coming out very soon, which we'll go over. And as time goes on, we'll start to bond it.
And then we'll also we're going to be spending more than we're bonding, and we'll start applying for reimbursement from the state. So we'll be getting money back in through bonding and also through reimbursement in the state. So it'll be my staff's job and the administration to manage that cash flow along with CREC to make sure that we're borrowing at the appropriate time. And what we're going to show you is how we're going to borrow in pieces to spread the debt service over time. So we're not going to borrow all $52 million at one time. It's not necessary, and B, that wouldn't be a smart way to budget because we'd have to start paying all that back right away. So the first slide just talks about how our current debt service right now for fiscal year 16 is $30.9 million. That includes our two pension bond issues, the one from 1998 and the one from 2013. The debt service from 1998 drops off at the end of fiscal 18. So in one of the future slides, you're going to see a major drop in our annual debt service related to the 20-year-old pension obligation bonds.
Mike?
So that debt, just keep that in the back of your mind, that we've been paying it for 18 years. We have 2 more years of debt service, and the old debt will be retired for pensions. So our debt service in fiscal 17 is going to increase from $30.9 million to $32.3 million in next fiscal year. And that is a result of the new pension obligation bonds. There's the early years of the debt service have a little bit of a spike in them. Then it's going to go down and it's going to level out, and you'll see it in a little later. But we all knew when we went in for these new pension obligation bonds that in the short term we had a bit of a spike, and that's what's going to be represented in the next slide. After fiscal year 18, our debt service will remain pretty flat at $32.5 million. But in fiscal 19, we're going to see that $4 million drop-off. The $4 million drop-off is mainly related to the old pension bonds going off the books, and then some of the current or more recent debt service that's going to be retiring in the next 2 years. And the town can take advantage of this drop-off in debt service when we're restructuring our debt for Stratford High School. So our plan right now is to go out for our next bond issuance in early July. That'll consist of fiscal year 16 bonding, because we've already approved that and spent the money, but we haven't gone out to bond it. Some fiscal year 17 bonding, and also some Stratford High School bonding. But I think we're going to go out in July, so our next debt service won't be due on that debt until fiscal 19, once the old debt service is over. So basically, we're going to smooth out our debt service to manage it and put it in the budget smoothly each year. So the objective is to utilize a series of short-term notes and bonds. So if we start running low on cash in fiscal 17, we may go out and just borrow some notes in the short term, but in fiscal 19, we will, in fiscal 18, we will go out and bond for Stratford High School. We're going to layer that debt. And beginning in 19, when we see the drop-off from the old pension obligation bonds. I know this is very exciting. The issue would be they'll be sized to provide the town with the funding necessary to support our net share of the costs, approximately $52 million, while maintaining a declining debt profile. Now, I say it's declining, but that's because we need to allow for our future debt, which is the fiscal 17 capital plan, the fiscal 18 capital plan. Every year we have to borrow a certain amount of money to maintain operations in town, paving the roads, etc. So assuming that we do not borrow anything else in the next 10 years, which obviously we know isn't true, our debt service in 16, as pointed out, was $30.9 million. It's going to go up to $32.3 million in 17. It's going to go up another $200,000 to $32.5 in 18. Then you start seeing the drop off, 28.4, 27.2, etc. and that gets declining throughout the 2020s. Now, in the gray column, in the next slide, in the gray column, you'll see how we're going to phase in the proposed debt service for Stratford High School. The green column, it's gray here, I apologize. We don't anticipate having to pay any debt service on that until 2018 because we're going to do the borrowing after June 30th. The first year we'll just pay interest of $534,000. The following year we'll start paying the principal in 2019. And that's at the same time that the old debt service will fall off. So even though this project was delayed, I have to say in some ways that we can't change the past anyway, but it's kind of a good thing because we're phasing it in perfect timing. The old pension bonds are falling off and Stratford High is picking up where they left off. So, and the next slide, you can see in fiscal 16 is where we're at now. 17, our debt service is going to go up $2 million. 18 is that's the end of the spike that I was telling you about. It's a 3 or 4 year spike we've had since we went out with pension bonds. After that, the old pension bonds drop off, and the new pension bonds get to be less and less of a burden over the next 20 years. And obviously, all of this assumes no new debt. Stratford High is the blue section. But even with the blue section, obviously we're going to have other debt that's going to make that decline be less dramatic than it is now. But the good news is after fiscal 18, we should be in a very healthy position. That's it.
Thank you very much.
No questions, right?
Question.
Yeah, no questions?
Oh, and I'm a Stratford High School graduate, and I learned all of this in Stratford High School.
Question.
I did, I really did. Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, given that we're so far into 2016 now, do we know how much our debt is going to be increased or what we're going to be going out to the bond market for this year? You said July, we're going out to the market.
We're going to go out to bond in July. I haven't quite identified that number yet. It's a combination of...
Is it a substantial number, like 10 million, or we...
It's more than 10 million.
It's more than 10 million.
It's probably closer to 20.
Now, will we start paying that down immediately, or do we get a leeway of a couple of years?
No, each year whenever we go out to debt, our first payments are due within 12 months, our first principal payments. So if we go out to bond in July, we'll pay interest in fiscal year 17, but we won't necessarily have to make our first principal payment until fiscal 18. So originally we were going to go out to bond earlier this year, but in December, February, but our cash flow is okay, so we decided we were going to try to smooth out the impact of that spike that we were talking about. And like I said, in the short term, if we need cash, we could go out and borrow money on a short-term basis. But I really don't anticipate that being necessary.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question. Susan, what do you anticipate being the term of the bonding for Stratford High School?
20 years.
And what do you
maximum.
What do you anticipate being the additional net debt service to the town for just this project on an annual basis?
On an annual basis is on here. Now, the overall project is 20 years. You break the project out into pieces, and different portions of the project have different life cycles. So we're going to structure the debt so the payments will be equal over 20 years, but not every portion of the project is 20-year life. I believe I do have that answer.
You have another question
here?
Here
you go. The debt service on Stratford High School from 2018 to 2026, so the first 8 years will be $69.6 million. So we're borrowing 52. It's going to be in pieces, so I really don't have what the final costs are going to be yet, but I could get that information. Yes?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is there currently, I know there's probably maintenance, being in an older building, as far as I know there was problems with the furnace and so on. Is there going to be a savings, obviously, with this new school of what we could be paying net for now, or what we have been paying to try to patch the school, patch things up? Do you have any kind of comparison?
I'm a finance director. I have no idea.
That may be a question for Turner.
Yeah.
Correct.
The anticipation is when you build a highly efficient building, as contrast that with a building that is, the word efficient doesn't really coincide with, you're going to have savings. We haven't quantified those savings because we're too busy trying to operate the building. So just sort of common sense says you're getting new HVAC systems, you're getting new energy efficient windows, you're getting new design building and construction material. The building's going to be more efficient. We've had recent discussions about our summer use, and we've had to explain to CREC and others that given it'll be our most efficient building in town, we'll be pushing things to this building this summer to take advantage of those efficiencies. So I can't give you a number, but just if you have a building that was built in the 20s versus something that's built in 2019, we have better construction materials, more efficient. Odds are everything will be at a cost savings, and we haven't quantified those. Like I say, we're too busy operating the building, but if you ever get a chance to walk around this building, on the southern wing of the building, the hallways are so slanted that when I took CREC and turned in the first time, they sort of looked at me like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, the hallways are literally like this. The building we're literally holding it together, town's holding it up through, Band-Aid and tape, but at some point in time, it's going to keep failing. So we've got to do what we got to do to get a new building up."
There's a whole bunch.
Yeah, real quick. Brian, when the town applies for the reimbursement in stages, how long is what's the turnaround time?
Yeah.
So you're allowed to apply every 2 months for reimbursement, and then it's about a month and a half turnaround after that.
That reimbursement process we go through on an annual basis. For instance, we had some security enhancements the last 2 years. What the state asks is you send us the invoice. We send them the invoices. They review the invoices. They send us the check, or they send Susan the check. So it's an ongoing process. So normal, we just want the internal will send us an invoice. We'll confirm the work was done. We pay it. Once we've shown we've paid it, we send it to the state. The state says you paid it. We can read the work was done. Then they send us the money. So it's a normal course of business. It wouldn't be anything unusual. So like Brian said, if we paid it on January, it should hit our account sometime in March. So there's always a check going out, and then a 2 to 3 month lag. That check and 60% is coming back in.
We scan all these documents as we pay them, so the whole process is pretty transparent. Tina.
So in the plans that were shared and in the great rumor mill that is Stratford, there's been talk about Board of Education offices being moved into the old home of Stratford High. Is there any plan for that? Can you dispel that? So the Board of Education is staying where it currently is. There's no plan to move those administrative offices to Stratford High School.
That was something that was studied way back when.
Okay.
But wasn't it?
Thanks.
I can't say that the administration is going to stay where it currently is because there's some discussion about other things, but I can say it won't be in Stratford High because the part that we were discussing is being torn down, so it won't be any place at Stratford High for us to go to. But I can't say we're going to stay where we currently are because we hear those same rumor mills about the Board of Ed being moved, so I won't say we're going to stay where we are, but I will say we won't be at Stratford High.
Sue, I just wanted to put this in perspective because I've read a couple of different pieces of information about our total town-wide bonding indebtedness. And I know you've talked earlier about pension liability bonding, the funding of it. I did read something from the State Office of Legislative Research that said we were 43.9% funded. But I thought the mayor had said that we were close to 80% funded for our unfunded pension liability? Which is it?
It's about 75 to 80%. You might have been looking at an older number.
It was an October 2015 legislative report.
Yeah, it's not accurate.
That's not accurate? Okay. So what is that roughly 20% of unfunded pension liability? What number is that? Is that $20 million? Is that $40 million? Because my calculation was that we've got about $250 million of total pension liability in its present value.
Right. We borrowed, I believe, $160 million. So we were up to our
Yeah, the number I saw was about 169 million, I think.
No, it was 160,
160? Okay. So that means the cost of this project, about $50 million to the town, would be equal to what we've got unfunded for our townwide pension liability. Would that be roughly correct?
You know, I don't have the pension valuation in front of me. We had money in the plan, I believe 80 or 90 million, and then we borrowed 160. So we were up to between 75 and 80% funded. And these pension obligation bonds that we're paying back in the next 25 years, so it's probably 22 years left. That's by the end of that time, we will be fully funded.
Well, I understand that, but to fund this on top of that pension liability would be doubling the unfunded pension liability, essentially. No?
I wouldn't look at it that way. Because the pension liability...
Well, let me just ask you this question, and it'll clear it up in my mind. What is presently the amount of the unfunded pension liability?
Again, I don't have that in front of me. I'm thinking it's... I don't have it in front of me. 60, 70, 80, I'd have to look at the pension.
60, 70, 80 million
I
dollars?
apologize. I've been working on other things and I don't have those numbers on.
But 60, you're talking about 60, 70, or 80 million dollars?
Yeah, it could be higher, but here's the thing. That is over the life of the pension plan. And the pension is a living thing because it's going to be alive and we're going to own it until the last pensioner or their beneficiary passes away. And that's probably going to be 50, 60, 70 years from now. So that's a long-term liability. Here we're talking about bonding for current expenses, current capital improvements for the town. So they're really two different animals.
You would consider this a current capital expense? A 25-year term or 20-year term?
Well, I'm compared to a pension. I'm just talking about this is infrastructure investment that we're doing, that we're going to depreciate over time, versus the pension liability is an ongoing thing.
And just for perspective, am I correct that the water pollution control plant is about $37 million of bonded debt we have?
I don't believe it's that high anymore because it goes down every month. We make a payment, but I can look at the schedule.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I think it was 37 about a year ago, so it's got to be more than that now.
I think we're moving to the public forum now.
Yep.
So if there are any other questions on any other aspects of the project. Mr. Petramus, this is the only mic that works.
I have one question. Okay. Stratford High School is projected to have 1,100 students in a year, up from 936 they currently have. Is that true for the Middle High School also?
When we did our demographic study, what we're projecting is both high schools are going to be around 1,050 to 1,100 at both high schools. Right now, there is an imbalance in the enrollment of the two schools. We're slowly working to change that with the addition of the Alpha program and the enrollment in our elementary schools. They should both be about 1,050 to 1,100. So our goals have no more than a 50 student gap between each schools.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for our finance director specifically? Go home. It's been a long day. Mr. Mimkunis?
I've been following this project for a long time. I finally got something to take place in 2010, giving me encouragement. We got to a place where we're starting to do something. I've gone through about 3 of these information meetings, justification of what we had. And all we're doing is just repeating and stalling on the actual development. It is my opinion that we should tonight, whoever's going to be here to vote on this, vote it in tonight. Get it done. We've seen these figures several times. They've been presented by everybody, and let's get it done. Go down and have the person who went down and found that $625,000 for the project on the north end of town, maybe they can find some more school projects that are hidden in the budget that we need. But let's not sit on our butts any longer. Get up there, each and every one of you 10 people that are responsible for this, and vote yes. No fooling around, no anything. Yes on this project. That's my opinion. Go for it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rinkunas. Phil Young would like to respond.
On Monday night, we're having an ordinance meeting, and we will be bringing up the appropriation of $103 million, or from $103 million to $125 million. So that will be coming up to vote on Monday night for this project.
I just want to comment. We also voted at the last council meeting to pass it. But since it's an ordinance, it has to go. Wait. Since it's an ordinance, it has to go to ordinance, and then it has to go back to council, and I'm sure it's going to be voted okay. We have 10 votes.
Yeah, we do have
You were there. You weren't paying attention, Walter.
Are there any other comments in the public forum? We do have 3 people who signed up to speak. If there are no other questions from the floor, Ms. Mass.
There's been a lot of talk about the cost, and I just want to say on the record, I was talking with Stephanie Phillips, who was sitting next to me. With the council that was seated before us, there was about $13 million bonded per year by the town every year, and that bond kept going and going and spending and spending. Last year, I think it was $8 million. So if this is able to happen, and now Ms. Collier's left, but what she's saying is that we can afford this and we can do this. I don't think there's any problem with it. And we're not going to be spending like we have in the past. You know, I think you heard that clearly up here tonight, that people are not looking to spend money we don't have and we don't have a plan to pay for. We're not going to buy things on credit that we can't pay for. That's just fiscally irresponsible. So I think that those things will change, and I'm glad to hear that we're in good financial health, and I think we can afford it, which is why I'm voting for the project.
Thank you. The 3 people who signed up for the public forum, the first one is Andrea Bilou. I think she... Oh, you're still here. Great.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Andrea Bayou, and I reside at 441 Washington Parkway, and I'm here tonight to support the Stratford High School renovation project. You have heard this evening timelines and data, and I wanted to share with you that the NEASC accreditation mandated the library and the science labs to be renovated, and that was passed in 2010, as you heard. The support was for the project prior from the Board of Ed, and I saw Susan Barksdale. I wanted to give a shout out to her. She was on the board when it first started. And Peggy Panzak was the PTA, very active parent, supporting this project. I thought it was interesting. I found a quote from Dr. Cornish I'd like to share with you, also supporting this project when it was first started, that states, when you look at the age of our buildings and you look at the infrastructure compared to what some of the surrounding communities are doing, we are losing some of our competitive edge. And we need to remain competitive so that we can keep our children and families invested in our public school systems here in town. And I think that's true. Bridgeport, if you've noticed, has built 2 magnet schools and has spots for our Stratford students. And many of our high school students attend other schools due to our limited resources. I think we have aging infrastructure and there's some neglect, and I'm going to make fun. Jack, I hope there's a work order for the hole I fell into out front. But, you know, it's time. We need to fix the school. I think technology was addressed, and I'd like to see one-on-one initiatives supported. We've tried to support this initiative with policy, but there's only so much support an old building can have. It would be an equalizer to our social economic student issues, and it would also help with loss of instruction time for snow days. I know the students at other high schools are using this initiative and are keeping up with their instruction. I would also just ask you to be clear and understand what needs to be done next. I know that there is an ordinance meeting, and then there is a vote to the town council, and then I believe the General Assembly will need some paperwork to file. Just, again, I support the increase in the bonding to support this Stratford High School renovation project. Thank you.
Okay, the next person who signed up was Lawrence Pratt.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Lawrence Pratt. I live at 1293 North Avenue. I'm a graduate of Trumbull High, and I moved back here about 3.5 years ago. I'm currently a professor at Medgar Evers College, a unit of the City University of New York. And individually, as well as at my university, we are working towards outreach programs with high schools. I work very extensively with students on research projects focusing on environmental issues and renewable energy. And talking about the features of the building, I think it's important to have some space that can be used for student research projects, science projects, engineering projects, perhaps even something like a mock-up of a miniature water pollution control plant where students can do hands-on learning. And these are things that cannot be set up at 8 a.m. and taken down at 5 p.m. I work with one student at Pauling High School in New York, and that's an issue we have. The faculty, the administration, I'm willing to work with the student, but it's very hard to set it up if there is not space dedicated for that type of activity. So I hope the designers will keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person is Stephanie Phillips.
Thank you. My comments are going to be really quick. I'm on the subcommittee with the Stratford High School renovation. One of the things I want to reemphasize is that part of the prior town council, this was one of the most unifying decisions that as a council we made. All 10 of us worked behind this, and I think that's significant. This was one of the best examples of our town coming together, and I hope that resonates, that we need more of this. This is about the issue. This is everyone, regardless of their background, supporting our kids and seeing the future. We understand that there's a cost. We understand that we have to be responsible, but we also know that this is the future of our town. And I am here to ask for your support to move this forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's all. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, the public for showing an interest in this project, people from CREC, from Antonazzi, superintendent, Clarence, principal, Mr. Del Piano, my fellow council members, but this has been, for me, I know I'm much more comfortable with the project. I'm not sure how my other council members feel, but it really has been wonderful to see the project come alive and hear the different perspectives on it. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. Safe drive home. Move to adjourn. Thank you.